Most people remember the moon landing through the same image. A ghostly figure descending a ladder. A bright white suit against a black sky. A human footprint pressed into lunar dust. And a picture that looks strangely poor. The moment itself feels larger than life, yet the video looks smaller than memory. Soft, washed out, unsteady. For an event watched by hundreds of millions of people, the image seems oddly fragile. It is easy to assume that is simply what 1969 technology looked like. But there is something unsettling hidden inside that assumption. Because the famous broadcast was not the best version. A better version existed. And that realization changes everything. As Neil Armstrong stepped onto the moon, a signal traveled from the lunar surface toward Earth. Tracking stations received it. Equipment recorded it. Engineers watched it arrive in real time. The image coming directly from the spacecraft was sharper than the one most of the world saw. Side-by-side comparisons make the difference difficult to ignore. Details appear cleaner. Motion looks smoother. The astronauts separate more clearly from the background. The moon itself seems less like a blur and more like a place. The familiar broadcast was not the original image. It was a conversion. The world inherited a copy. Somewhere behind that copy was a better source. And if that source had been recorded, then a simple question emerges. Where are the tapes? The search begins in a world built to preserve information. Tracking stations generated records. Storage facilities cataloged media. Government archives held vast collections of technical material. Reels of tape moved through systems designed to track them. The missing recordings were not a rumor. Investigators knew what they were looking for. 45 telemetry tapes. 1-inch reels containing the raw Apollo 11 moonwalk data. At first, the explanation seemed almost reassuring. Perhaps the tapes were misplaced. Large institutions move archives, buildings close, collections merge, labels fade, boxes migrate from one shelf to another over decades. The original recordings had simply fallen into the cracks. Somewhere, perhaps, a dusty canister still sat untouched among thousands of others. An anonymous reel waiting to be recognized. That possibility kept the search alive. Archive inventories were examined. Storage records were reviewed. Tracking station histories were reconstructed. Every recovered clue suggested the same thing. The tapes had existed. The tapes had been handled. The tapes had moved. Which meant they should still be somewhere. For a time, recovery felt possible. Not easy, but possible. Then the trail began to narrow. Shelves that should have contained evidence produced nothing. Locations that appeared promising ended in silence. Paperwork pointed toward movement, but not arrival. Investigators followed custody chains that seemed solid at first, only to discover gaps where certainty should have been. The missing object remained strangely physical throughout the search. Not a secret file, not a hidden document, just tape. 45 reels among countless others. Every failed lead removed another place they could be. Every dead-end inventory reduced the number of remaining explanations. The mystery slowly changed shape. The question was no longer which archive contained the tapes. The question became why no archive could produce them. Then another detail entered the story. 1-inch magnetic tape was valuable. Not because of Apollo, because it could be reused. A reel was not necessarily treated as a permanent historical artifact. It was often treated as storage. Something to record upon. Erase. then record upon again. The idea feels strange now. Yet the future importance of Apollo 11 was invisible to the people making routine decisions years later. To them, these were technical recordings inside a much larger system. And that system occasionally needed blank tape. The search continued. But now, a new possibility stood beside the old one. Maybe the tapes were not lost. Maybe they had been recalled. Maybe they had been processed exactly as countless other tapes had been processed. Maybe they had returned to the system. The shelves remained empty. The inventories remained incomplete. The recovery pathways continued disappearing. Eventually, the strongest surviving evidence pointed toward a conclusion that was almost disappointingly ordinary. The tapes were likely degaussed. Their magnetic information erased. The reels recertified, then reused. No dramatic destruction. No fire. No theft. No conspiracy. Just procedure. The clearest moving record of humanity's first steps on another world may have vanished because later operations required blank media. The explanation feels too small for the loss it produced. An achievement capable of reshaping history met a process designed to manage inventory. And inventory won. By the time the world fully understood what those recordings represented, the opportunity to protect them may already have passed. The search itself reflected that realization. At the beginning, investigators were looking for a location. At the end, they were confronting an absence. Every major possibility had narrowed. Every recovery route had weakened. The remaining evidence increasingly pointed not toward storage, but toward erasure. And with that realization, the meaning of the famous footage changes. Return to the image. The grainy figure. The washed-out signal. The hesitant movements crossing the lunar surface. For decades, that footage seemed like evidence of technological limitation. A reminder that television once looked primitive.
One giant leap.
Now it looks different. Now it resembles a surviving remnant. Not the original. Not the clearest record. The version that remained after something better failed to survive. The blurry picture became a kind of archaeological artifact. Evidence not only of a historic achievement, but of a historic loss. Humanity reached the moon. The footprints remained. The photographs survived. The story endured. But somewhere along the way, the sharpest moving record of that moment disappeared into ordinary procedure. And that may be the strangest part of all. The greatest technological achievement in human history is still remembered through a degraded image. Not because better footage was never captured, but because the better footage was treated like reusable storage. The moon landing survived. Its best record did not.